Hey everybody, this is Beyond Range, and today we're gonna be working on the fundamentals. So we're in the big blind and we're facing continuation bets versus the button, and we're facing 1/3. The board texture is Ace King 4 here, and versus a third pot continuation bet. Basically, we want to think about the range that's going to be continuing. In this spot, you could say we have almost 30 odd percent of basically ace x and king x combined. We also have a lot of these kind of pocket pairs. We also have a lot of gut shots. When you think about continuing, the deuces is going to end up being good enough to be able to continue. Now, essentially, you're probably folding this spot maybe 35% of the time with your range, and the deuces is roughly within that kind of percentile to continue. Now we're getting to the turn, which is a 10, which creates a bunch of nuts for both players, and then deuces, you can see how we're basically toward the bottom of our range. We will have some types of like queen highs that could be bluffing in this spot, but there's gonna be a lot of ace x in terms of our value region. We're gonna have some hands here like a straight, we'll have some stuff like king 10, we'll have some other kind of strong combinations that might want to eke out a decently large bet sizing and that we can end up putting into some small bet sizes, but the deuces here, you don't need to do anything particularly fancy. Basically, this will end up probably bluffing most of the time, maybe all of the time, but that might be like a slight overextension because I think you need to be still checking a decent amount of hands like ace x, or else in position just kind of starts betting really thin with all of their ace x, and you need to make their bluffs indifferent, and you call it a bunch of king x, blah blah blah, whatever. You might just bluff this 100%, I'm not sure, but in terms of different sizings, you can see that there will be some ace x. If you had a hand like a7, you might go something like a third pot. You might go something like 2/3 pot. Maybe a7 for 2/3 is a bit thin, but maybe something like ace9 would end up going a touch larger. You can have some overbets. So I think with something like deuces here, you don't need to pick the perfect sizing, though this particular combo might be a little bit more efficient for using large sizings, but basically you just want to use logic, trying to understand the ranges, and then go from there. Now we're on the a6-4, and we have jack 3. And basically on this texture, we're right at about the cusp of the hand that has to probably fold. Maybe jack 5 gets in there, maybe jack 3 gets in there, but when you think about this spot, if your range is too wide after you call the continuation bet on the turn, well, your opponent is going to be able to start value betting quite thinly. You're going to have to put money in quite aggressively with weak parts of your range in order to maintain the equilibria. So there's a lot of folding that goes on in this spot. Now, I'm not sure if jack 3 will fold 100%. I really don't even study very much. I'm probably a bit too lazy, but I use my intuition a lot, which is not really the best approach. I think it's better to study, but it's hard to maintain, different life things. So it's actually on pure fold, which I didn't know. I thought maybe we would continue a little bit. I thought it was right on the cusp. The queen and the ace and the 7 rainbow here, you have jack 8. And this again is going to be a hand that's very close to the cusp. But if you end up continuing a lot of random backdoor flush draw, jack high, king high, 10 high, backdoor flush draw, straight draw stuff, and you're also continuing all your pairs, you're continuing all your shots. You're gonna get to the turn pretty weak. So this seems like, it might be a call, but it seems like a fold to me. But it seems like somewhat close again. This is the way that I read the situation. So here on the ace 5-5, it's gonna be another situation where we're actually kind of doing quite a bit of fold in this spot. Now, our opponent is gonna be basically taxing our unpaired hands, our weakest hands. He's saying, hey, I have an advantage in terms of equity, in terms of my range, but also you have a lot of 5x, and if my range is too weak, then I can leverage that and raise and force you to bluff catch very thin. So his betting range has to be a little bit stronger, basically, when he starts to go with the bet. King deuce here is not allowed to fold, but I don't know at what point you start making folds. Maybe something like queen 7, queen 6, queen 8 would start folding with the backdoor flush draw. I don't know if a hand like queen 10 or queen jack would always continue, but these are the kind of things that you want to be thinking about, basically. We're going with the turn check. Our opponent is going to have a stronger range. We didn't check raise the flop, so we're basically saying, hey, we mostly have some bluff catchers, some weak hands, and some traps. And he's still uncapped, given that he's gone with the bet. River, there are some hands that we end up like getting here with. There's a lot of hands like deuces and threes and fours. There are some amount of jack X from something like queen jack or king jack, and then a lot of ace X. I think that king deuce, when you think about where you are in your range, you probably need to bluff this sometimes, but I don't know how often. Apparently very infrequently. So I was making a mistake about sort of the value of this situation, and I thought that it would be hard to find enough bluffs. I also thought the 8 would be like hitting a lot of our hands like 8-7 and 8-6 and 9-8 and 10-8 with a backdoor flush draw. But apparently I'm making a little bit of a frequency error in this situation. Here on the ace jack 6, I think 9-8 is kind of a little bit cuspy, but I don't think it's a massive deal. But you have a lot of hands like queen 10, you have a lot of hands like king 10, you have a lot of jack X suited, you have a lot of ace X, and you have a lot of 6x and pocket pairs. I think if you start digging toward hands like 9-8 with the backdoor flush draw, your range is probably a little bit too polluted, but you might throw it in here a touch. But yeah, it's a little bit weak. So we're on the ace king deuce, and the jack 4 here should be better than a hand like jack 6 because we've got multiple backdoor straight draws. So a 5 and a 3 would create a straight with our 4, and in addition to that, a queen and a 10 runoff would create a straight for our jack, whereas if we had a hand like jack 6, those things would not be happening. So it still feels kind of cuspy to end up continuing this, but I think maybe with the backdoor straight draw we're probably just mostly continuing. Apparently we were not calling that often, so it probably means that we're doing a bunch of folds, because I don't think this is going to get into the race line particularly often. So I'm probably over continuing on flop with some of these backdoor flush draw combinations. And then river, we're basically stone bottom of our range. When you think about our value region and what we're going to be betting, we're going to have a lot of hands like ace jack, ace 10, ace 8, ace 7, etc., ace 6. We're also going to have a fair amount of hands like king queen, king jack, king 10. We turn some king 9. So I think that mixing up your sizings with big and with small basically make a lot of sense. I'm not sure about the best bet sizings here, but I would assume that you're going to use a lot of overbet in this spot with, something like ace 10, ace jack, ace 8, etc. That makes logical sense to me. So the flop here, I think the 5 deuce just needs to pitch. It's a little bit too weak on this texture. We do have a backdoor straight draw and backdoor flush draw, but we're just basically continuing too wide. Here with 10-9 on the ace-8-3, we have 2 overcards to the 8, but I think we probably just need to fold this. There might be some weird stuff where like you do continue this because there are runouts like 7-6 and like 7 jack and like queen jack that come where you end up making a bunch of straights and just having this in your range. Like if you never have it, then your opponent might start just putting tons of money when these straights come in, so you might call it, but apparently we're continuing way more than I expected. I really thought that this 10-9 would almost always fold, but I just wanted to add the caveat that we might occasionally continue it for the reasons that I stated. So we're gonna call this a session, but basically we're trying to just use logic when we're thinking about continuation bets and facing them. When we're really playing poker, we're trying to use logic. A lot of times I think it's easy to simply look at a board and say, oh, we have 2 overcards against 1/3 pot bet, or we have a backdoor flush draw against 1/3 pot bet, and we always continue, or we always fold. But I think those things are not necessarily the case. Anyways, we're gonna call this a session, and we're gonna be back. Today we worked on some ace-high textures. Next time we'll work on another texture. Okay, guys. Bye for now.